am Zag Krabatronic, and I have traveled from a distant world to do battle with Zig Copacetic, for he has put 5 points in the enemy flaw. And I have come for him. I have come to steal his nation's precious reserves of maple syrup. That syrup will be mine. Oh, no, I'm just kidding. I'm not really a space invader. It's me, Trevor Van Onion, and this is a video response to Zig Copacetic's video about the flaw of the enemy in RPGs. Now the enemy flaw is so excellent. It's just a great flaw because not only is it giving you some background to your character of the why, the when, and the how of how you made this enemy, but it also informs the future of your character, because you will, throughout the entire campaign arc, you will be dealing with your enemy until you or the other is dead in the ground. Unless Alikov the Necromancer is about, then all bets are off. You never know how it'll end. So, like all things in RPGs, the enemy flaw has such great potential, but it needs to be used responsibly, and there are many pitfalls that you might fall into when using it. First, and unsurprisingly, the enemy flaw is a flaw, and it's often an expensive one that gives the character a lot of points, and you need to use it accordingly. Now, if you use the enemy too much, if this enemy is omnipresent, if they seem to be assaulting the character from all angles and at all times, they actually will lose their menace. They'll lose some of their power because they lose what is so special about them. They lose what is so menacing and dangerous. Now, if you don't use the enemy flaw enough, well, then you have to question, why is it even a flaw anymore if it's never showing up? You have to find the right amount to be using the enemy. And unlike many other flaws, the enemy flaw can actually be wasted. Imagine this. Garrett the Rogue is mortal enemies with Sluggo the Ogre. So Garrett the Rogue and his party are tromping through the forest. And then Sluggo the Ogre bursts out onto the road and he says, "Fee, fi, fo, fizzum. You're about to get a face full of arrows. Why did I attack a party all by my lonesome? Oh, the adventurers, they got me." At this point, Garrett the Rogue has gotten off scot-free and Sluggo the Ogre is dead in the dirt. It's a very anticlimactic way to be using an enemy. You need to know that when you have the final confrontation with an enemy, it needs to be at the end of a campaign arc. It needs to be special, and you need to know that one of the two characters is probably going out. Now, you can have all kinds of enemies. You can have brutes, you can have masterminds, you can have both, and then you're screwed because that means that Bane is after you. Maybe it's the comic book villain, maybe it's the god from Forgotten Realms. It doesn't matter. You're dead. Now, you can also have one of my favorites. You can have an organization as an enemy, and this is fun to explore. So let's talk about some enemies. Let's talk about the Brute. Now, the Brute isn't going to act like Sluggo the Ogre from earlier. No, the Brute still has enough low cunning to get the upper hand on your character. The Brute might be an orc pirate king. It might be a feral gangrel that menaces you with its destructive claws. It might be that force of destruction sort of supervillain like Juggernaut or the Blob or Killer Croc, who's just going to overpower you and destroy you physically right in hand-to-hand combat. Now, the Brute is still going to have presence of mind enough to know when to strike. Imagine them like the slasher villain. Either the slasher villain is physically imposing, but it still stalks your character, it still hunts your character. It's still going to strike you when you're at your weakest, it's going to strike you when you're alone. But perhaps if your party members are always around you trying to protect you because they know you have this enemy, the Brute will perhaps send some minions after them so that the Brute can find you and sort you out. Now, when a Brute strikes, they might strike and then fade away. And what I mean by this is, in the past, I used for a gangrel player character in a vampire campaign. His sire was actually his enemy. And each year, this elder gangrel would seek out his child, or he would stalk him, he would hunt him through the glass jungle that is the city, and he would find him, and he would pounce, and he'd yank off a limb and hurl it down the street, and he would tell his childer, I'm doing you a favor. I'm hunting you each year, and I'm destroying you, because this will sharpen your hunting senses, and this will keep you from being killed by your enemy. Now, from that elder gangrel's point of view, he was doing his childer a favor by hunting him, but the neonate gangrel did not quite see it that way. He was not a fan. Now, a brute wants to show their power, and they want to show their strength. So they may, in fact, assault the character, beat them down into the dust, stand over them and say, now you know my power. Now you know that I can strike you at any time, and now you know that you can do nothing in retaliation. And then they will leave, and this will hang above that character's head, and they will wonder when the final confrontation will be. They will wonder when they will be put, instead of into the dirt, when they will be put into the grave. Now, speaking really quick about the brutes and the minions and stuff, so one character has taken this enemy flaw, let's say. You shouldn't punish the rest of the party for someone else's flaw. Yeah, it's realistic, but it never feels good when you get destroyed because someone else took a 5-point flaw of enemy and they've captured you and they threw you in a volcano. So just think about that when you're sending minions after the rest of the party. They should be beatable. Now, the next sort of minion is the mastermind. And these villains are actually probably easier to use because this is the enemy that will haunt and torment their character from any angle, from at all times, and from any place. Because they are the mastermind, they have worked out all the angles. They will constantly be sending minions out to harass their enemy character. These are the villains that will send bugbear assassins after you. This is the character that will condemn the haven of a rival vampire so that the city will bulldoze it and leave them without a place when the sun is coming up. These are the villains that will detect and learn the secret identity of a superhero, and then they will capture Aunt May and they'll capture Mary Jane and they'll dangle them from a bridge and force the hero to choose. That is the mastermind. They're perhaps the easiest to use. Now the next is one of my favorites, and this is the organization that is the enemy of one of your characters. Now this is sort of pulling double duty because you get to use the minions of the organization, but as it would stand to reason, the head of the organization must also hate your character. Now since you have the organization as the enemy, it means that while the minions are super expendable, that mastermind villain at the top, he can go out too. Because like a Hydra, when you cut off one head, it might grow 2 more. So imagine the cult of Malbolgia, which is Italian for evil bag. And this is an insane cult that worships a bag of holding because they're totally nuts. Now, they're constantly sending minions after your character, and they wield knives and they have sacks over their head. And they attack you. This is a constant reminder that you have this organization as an enemy. And so you're constantly dealing with these minions, and you're working up through the campaign arc and your character arc until the day where you confront that cult leader, and you battle him in hand-to-hand, and you stuff him into his own bag of holding, and then you and the rest of your party, give him the pinata treatment. Now, speaking of weird-ass villains, make sure that your character's nemesis is as interesting and unique and creates as many memories as your character themselves. Now, think about Batman, right? Batman is awesome. We all like this character, but Batman is kind of the least interesting thing in his own mythos. Think about his rogues gallery. You know, the Scarecrow and the Joker and Harley Quinn and Catwoman. Forget about it. These characters are awesome, and they're so memorable. And you want your nemesis to create these memories. You want your people to say, oh man, your character's awesome, and that nemesis, that's even cooler. So remember to create tons of menace, tons of pathos for when your character finally overcomes this villain, or, unfortunately, perhaps when the villain overcomes them, and then you have this tragic story about the evil triumphing over good. It's very sad, but it's also very memorable. So think of a unique villain. Like, imagine that long ago, your character had a duel with a hulking and brutish lizard man warrior. And during this duel, that lizard man bit hold of your character's left hand, bit it right off. Now that lizard man has a taste for you and it wants more. But during the duel, you wielded your spear and you cut out his right eye. Now, after the battle, when you both escaped to nurse your wounds, you both went to Magitech steampunk alchemist types, and you had your left hand replaced with a magical construct. And this lizard man went to another wizard, and he had his eye replaced with a whirring Magitech clockwork device that had a scrying stone built in, and it was attuned to your character's left hand. And now this lizard man, at all times, is able to hunt your character, to stalk them from the shadows, to menace them at any moment. But when this lizard man comes close, you can hear the tick-tock, tick-tock of his steampunk eye as he searches you out to devour the rest of you. Now, will the last thing your character hears, will it be the tick-tock of their life clacking away? Or will you be able to make your escape as this character menaces you from the shadows? So this is the sort of thing that you should aspire to when you make your nemesis. They should be on the same high pedestal as your character, full of flavor, full of character, quite literally. So, those are my thoughts on the enemy flaw in RPGs.